What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Partially Cultured Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron. With me, as always, is my co-hosts, Alan and Isaac.
Hey guys,
and
how's it going, guys?
Just remember, you guys, to hit us up on all the social medias. We have Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and our website, partiallycultured.com. Hit us up in comments anywhere. Hit us up an email. Tell us what you want us to talk about, and we'll do our best to get it on here. So, that being said, today we're going to talk about John Titor. And for anybody that does not know who John Titor is or was or is going to be, Alan, why don't you give us an overview on John Titor?
I'm gonna try to do my best here because it's a very convoluted topic. There's lots of misdirection and ulterior people involved. So let's give you what I got. So John Titor is a time traveler from the year 2036. He is part of the military, and his world lines are what he refers to for the different strings of time that break off or exist in parallel. He came back originally to 1975 to acquire a IBM 5100 computer, which apparently, and at the time of this happening, no one knew that this computer had this function, but apparently this computer has a function that was hidden by the engineers, which allows it to decipher a bunch of very, very old machine code, like APL and BASIC and stuff, and it had a bunch of other languages that it was able to do that wasn't disclosed to the public. So he had to get that machine for whatever reason. They didn't really he didn't really explain why he needed that machine, but that's what was originally what happened. Then he stopped in, I believe it was 1998, and then in the year 2000. And I think the last time that he shows up, the original John Titor shows up, I believe it's around 2001, 2002. When the post originally started occurring was on this old radio show called Art Bell. I think, if I'm not mistaken, the original time that he sent a fax into the show was 1998.
Art Bell is the one that started the Coast to Coast radio show, right?
Exactly, Coast to Coast, and it was like a paranormal type radio show.
Right.
And he had a website and a forum, BBS, back in the day. And after that fax, a couple years later, or a little while after, John Titor started showing up in the BBS forums for Art Bell, and he would post diagrams of his time machine, pictures of his time machine. He'd answer people's questions, talk about imply events that occurred. Mind you, this is all stuff that happened. This is all happened before 9/11, before the Discovery disaster, before Second Gulf War, with war on terror and all that stuff. And he never explicitly called out those things, but he inferred a lot of stuff that happened later on. He also made a bunch of other predictions about his world line, things that happened in his world line. But then he also would caveat it with the way world lines work and their temporal divergence being almost like a percentage base. So things that may have happened in his world line don't always necessarily happen in our world line. And when he says when he originally arrived in our world line, it was only a 1 to 2% divergence. But the longer that he exists in any world line, the divergence slowly grows, right? Because of the butterfly effect of him being here. So there's things that he predicted are very scary, very crazy. Some stuff that he predicted that actually came true. There's stuff that he said that would be discovered technology-wise or physics-wise that actually was discovered. So it's a very interesting topic. There's a lot of different discussion on to why, if he was real, or why he knew these things, or how he knew these things. So it's a really interesting topic. So that's what we're doing here.
All right. So, on the surface, if somebody hears this, the immediate thought is bullshit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I have to say, in my little bit of research on this, and it's honestly been just a little bit. I heard about this years ago and did research back then on it, and I'm like, ah, I mean, it's almost believable because of the specifics that only he knew, like this particular IBM model, you know being able to do this debugging. So if it's a hoax, number one, it has to be somebody that was involved
No.
with or was an actual engineer of this machine. I mean, because it's not going to be something a lot of people know.
And IBM disclosed later, like years and years later, after this whole thing even happened, right? Like that's true. That's a real function of this
Right.
5100. So
So going down the hoax line, what would an old IBM engineer or someone that's heard about this have to gain from this hoax?
so I'm not sure about the IBM engineer, but there have been other people that have been linked to him that have been proven to be like false, right? So there's John Titor 2. He's like this copycat who presented to be essentially a different clone or a different version of John Titor, because part of the whole John Titor, phenomena is that, and from him saying, he says he interacts with himself in the original, when he originally came and originally landed in our world line, he talks about interacting with baby him or other versions of him in other timelines. It's not like this is his only time. He's going through time all the time, right? Back and
Doc
forth, different timelines.
Doc Brown would tell him that is a bad idea.
The way he describes it is that it doesn't really impact things the way we think it will just it will make this world line different than another. So it will increase the divergence, the temporal divergence, but it doesn't really affect anything else besides that. And he's like, oh, people would say like, oh, you're gonna mess up our timeline. And he's like, not really. I'm just another person that exists here, and I'm doing things and interacting with the world the same way you would interact with the world. There's no like catastrophic, temporal, destroying thing that happens that destroys anything. So, but anyway, this John Titor 2 guy pretended to be John Titor, talked about being a clone or like one of those other versions from a different timeline, and he would used to go on shows and try to like sell stuff, and he got proven to be like a con artist from Canada. Then there's this lawyer. There was like a lawyer and his brother. He was an entertainment lawyer in Florida,
Hmm.
and he supposedly was the guy, like the in between person for the original John Titor. And but he was selling like shirts. Oh, he was selling a copy of a book for the John Titor Foundation, um, and he got found out to like not be super legit or something along those lines. Like him and his brother got found out to not be super legit. And then there's this lady who she might be crazy, she might be real. I can't remember her name, but this lady essentially um, said she was the in between person with for John Teeter and sometimes the forum or other people trying to reach him. And supposedly Teeter gave her a song that he would either sing to her or tell her about, or like a jingle that he would say or something, so that she knows that it's him contacting her every time that he contacts her. And he would like, and she's been very adamant throughout the years that he was real and not, that he's legit, and he's told her things that have come true and whatnot. So I
The,
don't see the point in people making money on it, because it's not like there's never been an instance where he tried to sell anything. You know what I'm saying?
well, the guy that I mean, if the entertainment lawyer or whatever was behind it for real, then I mean, obviously it was to sell books, you know.
But
But
even then, he only sold. What he essentially did was take the stuff that was online,
and just put it in a
put it in a
digestible
book.
format.
Yeah, and then he sold it for like very small amount, and then just that's it. Like it was for a short period of time, like a special edition type thing, sold out single run, and then that's it. So
So, so does this lady claim that the Tidor still contacts her now?
yeah, but very he still contacts her now, but very sporadically, and it's not always about anything crazy or anything like out of the normal or out of the way that he kind of always reacted about time was because there's so many different world lines and so many different branches that he's like very cavalier about things that are gonna happen or not happen. Like he doesn't he from the very get-go, he's like, I'm not here to try to prove to anyone that I exist. Like that's not my goal, a goal of mine's, right? Because
Right. So
I don't care.
let's talk about that. What was his goal? Why if he came back to 1975, got his computer, jetted back to his military unit and saved 2036 from, Skynet or whatever. Why did he stop in 2000? What was his
From
point?
my He never explicitly said
Well, I
what it
think he
was
said
that he
that he
was
was
doing.
gonna visit his parents. I think is what it
Well,
was,
he
right?
he said he wanted to visit, but he has his parents 2036, so it's like, why don't you just go to your real parents? But I think it was something along the lines of he never the way the vibe I got was like maybe one of his parents passed or something in
I
2036
think they
because there
died
was a
during the
huge
war, don't
war.
they? Maybe I don't know.
No, you might be right because there was a huge well, in his time world line. There was a huge World War III, and like 3 billion people died, and like he said,
So
go ahead.
okay, so that's the answer is he stopped to see his parents.
Yeah, he
Why
spent time with his
why
parents. Yeah.
post on this bulletin board and send faxes and stuff? Visit your parents and jet.
He was just bored. He was here for a few years from the sound of it. So,
This is my problem with the story right here. If I was a time traveler and my mission wasn't to come here and prove that time travel is real or whatever, I wouldn't post on forums and crap. I'd get my mission done and get home. So
but that's
that's
the thing. But you are saying that from the perspective of someone that doesn't have the capability to just be
that
wherever.
I'm saying that from the perspective of someone not owning a DeLorean with a flux capacitor.
Yeah, but the thing about if you could go anywhere at any time, well, not anywhere because they had like there wasn't a hard limit on the time that he could go back, but it was like the further you go back based on with the technology they currently have, the divergence grows, so you will be in a much different,
Right.
a
So
very very different
if you go
time
back to
world.
1900, then your divergence may be 40 or
I
50%.
think yeah, he had a cap of like 60 years or something like that, if I remember right.
Yeah,
63 years, and he couldn't do all the way to 1975 in one step or one hop. He was supposed to go back to some in between date and then go back to 1975, come back to 2000. Maybe there's like some kind of
There's some like when you're
layover.
scuba diving,
Yeah, maybe
you
something
have
like
to
that. You
oh,
have to
maybe that's what it was.
recalculate it.
stop at different parallel universes before you explode.
Well, I think it was more about getting back to his world line. He made it sound like he didn't, like it's very very intricate and very, not it's not a super figured out technology yet, right? Like it's relatively new when he comes, and for him to get
2034 is when
back,
they said that they
yeah.
invented it or whatever. So he's only like a couple years out with that technology.
So, and he
Oh,
says like there's a,
and by the way, if anybody goes and looks at the pictures, apparently this time machine, the first one made, is made by GE. So
yeah,
if you do not have an investment in GE right now, you might want to think about it for your
and
2036 royalties.
well, he talks about, and it was CERN that discovered the technology to do it, and apparently it functions on like a mini black holes and mini singularities, and it bends time around it. Um, funnily enough, if anyone's into anime, there's this anime called Steins Gate that has a lot of this stuff in it, like the time travel and John Titor specifically, and like it's a fun show if you want to check it out. But um, it was essentially like this machine that would, when it would travel through time, it would scoop out a section of the ground that it lands in, because it would essentially be a like a kind of like a sphere that's traveling through time.
It's a TARDIS.
So, but I think he said he made it sound like it was like like something that he could put in a car because it didn't he had it in a vehicle, I believe, but it wasn't something that was in a vehicle.
It's a
It was something that he
DeLorean.
like. It was like in a box that he carried around with him, and it was like a very big box, kind of like a big ass turntable coffin. It kind of had looked like a big, big container, and he would carry that with him.
So it's a portable device. So he can just be walking down the street and just poof, disappear.
It's very from the way he made it sound, it was like it's relatively heavy and cumbersome. So I don't think it's something you'd want to be
Well,
lugging around all the time.
but you could lug it in a backpack or something if you had to.
Not a backpack, but I mean,
Are you talking about
a rucksack.
Oh, you're talking about the
No.
actual time travel device? I don't think so. I think that was pretty
it was
much
pretty
mounted
big.
in the vehicle. I mean,
Oh, what was the thing that was the size of the truck?
No, he had it would be able to fit in something the size no like a turntable coffin. So like one of those big
Oh, I got you.
two turntables and then you have an amplifier in
I'm
the
thinking
middle
like
and
one turntable with just a
no
lid.
no
yeah.
I got
no
you.
like a big 6 foot long
two
type of deal.
turntables and a microphone.
Mhm.
And
Kinda table.
like the mixer in the middle and
Right.
yeah
Okay.
and it was like thick and heavy or whatever, but like he had it mounted in like a car, but he was saying that if you wanted to like carry it around like move it around, you hypothetically could put it in some kind of packaging and move it around like.
So
the interesting part about that, I mean, the time travel device itself is that theoretical physics at the time of him writing these messages on the message board said that wasn't actually the way that time travel would be working.
Yeah.
If we did have time travel, it didn't make sense, and the idea of having mini black holes wasn't even a thought of. Well, it wasn't.
Something that anyone believed really. Even Stephen Hawking
Even
like
Stephen
shot it
Hawking
down.
didn't believe that those were a thing, and he actually had to walk that back years later. That those actually do exist. So there's some things that he said that, from the physics aspect, would take somebody that's very intelligent, or at least has some kind of connection to somebody that knows something about it. It's not something like
Yeah.
just some guy with a tinfoil hat or something would be able to figure out on his own.
I want to go off the track just a little bit. Let's go down a little bit of a rabbit hole. Time travel, or the thought of time travel, the thought of the Holy Grail, the thought of the Fountain of Youth, the thought of all these things have been around forever. Do you think all these things are just what someone has come up with in their mind? Or do you think all these things really exist and is part of human destiny to discover?
Well, my whole thing is my thinking on it kind of vibes with the way he says time works. The way he describes time essentially being a huge nest of world lines that are constantly diverging, constantly splitting, constantly having branches and whatnot, and sometimes they go into another one, and like all these different little butterfly effects that come in and change things, and you essentially have an infinite world of dimensions and parallel universes and world lines, right? Like a huge nest of them. Um, it even kind of blends with deja vu and the Mandela effect, where like maybe sometimes those world lines intersect, right? And they cross beams, right? And some of the stuff from other world lines blend in or blend out, right? And things that exist in one blends into another. So I'm like, maybe it's possible that some of those things that we believe or think, or those like legends, are things that exist in other world lines,
So
and they
hold
just
on.
happen to cross over into ours. Or maybe
Let's,
or maybe he even said something really cool. He mentioned like aliens he believes are not real. He thinks that aliens are time travelers from other time periods that have much more sophisticated um, cloaking technology. So maybe it's those guys messing with things and causing world lines, or coming back and playing pranks on certain world lines. And
so hang on real quick before I forget my thought. Going back to deja vu for a second, and I want to do an episode on deja vu, but so we'll get deeper into that.
Mhm.
But the way you describe that though is if I see something in my timeline and then I see something or I feel like I've been there before, I'm having
Maybe you were.
a deja vu effect. You're saying that I'm existing on multiple timelines?
Maybe you like, no, of course, yeah. Like you could exist in multiple timelines, and your conscious hypothetical could exist on multiple timelines. And maybe at some point the divergence factor was so minimal that those timelines collapsed and became one. And then that deja vu moment maybe is that. Maybe that deja vu moment is the instant in which that occurred, and that's why you feel like, huh, I've seen this before. And like you're thinking back and like, well, that's so weird. Same thing with like the Mandela effect, and we want to do an episode on that. But the Mandela effect's the known phenomena that
Right.
happens across the world where people remember things collectively very different. Like Berenstain Bears versus Berenstein Bears. Lots of people will remember one way or the other, and
Yep.
they'll swear to death about it and have images of it and remember. Like I remember it myself, right? I'm one of the Berenstein guys, and now it's Berenstain.
Right.
So, like, that's another possibility of where maybe the world lines collapsed, right? And if there's really just this huge nest of ever changing, ever moving, ever shifting world lines, and some of them maybe blend or merge together, maybe that's what happens. Maybe that's what's going on.
Hmm.
Maybe that's what's causing you to have these like phantom memories on, you know, things that didn't actually occur in your head or in the, maybe they occurred somewhere else.
All
Well,
right.
I don't know.
So let's get back to John Titor.
I remember one of the reasons why they said, or why he said that he came, they kind of revealed himself, I think, was somebody had posted on that Coast to Coast AM thing that they had come from a future timeline or something, or they were time traveler from the 2600s or something. And I think he thought that that was kind of an odd thing because in all of his recollections, anybody trying to go past 2540 or something like
Oh
that,
yeah,
there was just
in the
blackness. There was
future.
basically nothing out there. So there was essentially an emptiness in I think it's the year 2540, and they were trying to figure out what went wrong in order to cause that because there couldn't have and there shouldn't have been anybody from or like beyond that because it doesn't exist.
It
The
doesn't
timeline
exist yet.
doesn't exist at all. Like there's
That's a
nothing
good
there.
point. That yeah, yeah,
So he was talking about that. I think that was one of the reasons why he kind of probably piqued
to
his
debunk that or
curiosity and
something.
was just like, hey, let me talk about this. And the other element about the 5100, that IBM computer, was that it was a portable system that at the time was kind of like one of the peak devices. It
Yeah.
also had that ability uh, to translate, which we didn't know about. Nobody knew about at the time. Um, but it had more memory than a lot of systems. In fact, it had more memory than the Commodore 64, which was released like 10 years later or
Yeah,
something
it
like
was
that.
beast.
It was portable, even though it was like 100 pounds or something like that.
Yeah.
It was still portable, which is another feature that you would find pretty useful in the future. Especially you don't want to have to lug a different kind of power supply or whatever they had to do for that, or arrange that configuration. But also that they had some kind of the reason he said they needed it was a lot of the current infrastructure that they had at the time was lost during the wars because of what was it? Something
EMP.
Nukes,
EMP pulse or something
EMP
like
and
that.
nukes,
Yeah,
and
I mean, there's a nuclear war, so the EMP would make
yeah.
sense if that happened. So they didn't have any devices that could possibly work or anything at that time. So they're relying basically on old technology. So those kind of things, I mean, they kind of make sense to a degree. I mean, I still think it's kind of a weird deal. I don't really know if I believe it, but
So let's talk about this.
some of it's sensical or sounds sensible.
All the computers in the world are destroyed. Our infrastructure is gone. But we got this time machine that works.
Well, no, they not everything's gone. He implied that a lot of things are broken down, a lot of things are messed up, There's some areas that are inaccessible because of radiation, or difficult to access because of radiation. That there's certain technologies that you could get to, and certain things you can access. And that technology, they have wireless internet. That's something that he mentioned, them having like essentially like 4G type of data around the world, like around the world. It's like technology exists, but it's not as central to our life how it is now. Like it's not this. And mind you, this is back in like 1998 when it really wasn't that crazy, and technology and stuff like that wasn't as big as prevalent as it is now. Like he like pretty much that, and they don't revere it, and they use it as like a tool, right? Not as something that they care about. Like in their timeline, family's super duper important.
So,
He
so in their timeline, TikTok's not popping.
Nah, nah, nah. He made it sound like because of the wars and so many people dying and all the radiation and stuff, people live in smaller communities now, centralized around well, in his area in particular, around forts or like military bases where they all kind of collected when the war was going on, universities and stuff like that. And you care about your parents more and your family and your community, and all the food is like local because you can't go. It's hard to get to certain regions because of the radiation and whatnot. So a lot of foods grown locally, and um,
Doesn't sound like a horrible timeline to me, other than nukes. But
Well, he actually
and
says something like that in the post. I mean, he says something like, "Have you ever thought of losing a couple billion people or something like that?
I
It's actually a
saw
good
that.
thing or
how to
something."
affect the mental. Yeah,
Have you ever thought about if you lost a couple 300 billion, it might not be too bad for you?
yeah.
Which I mean,
Well, he's also said like prejudice isn't a super huge thing in his time in his world line, because when the wars were going on,
everybody was
everyone
united.
had to come together. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Everyone had to come together, and like you started appreciating people more for being part of your crew, part of your squad, like part of your country or whatever it was they were broken into. So they removed a lot of those like petty superficial things that people divide themselves, like the tribalism.
yeah. You see a lot of
um
that now, and you really see unity with like ex-military,
Mm,
um, ex-team sport players.
mhm.
At a high level, football, basketball, college and stuff, high school, anything that you are forced to rely on your team or your squad. I mean, you'll see a lot more unity in people like that, which which makes perfect sense. I mean,
So
so
critics are going to say that it's not realistic for him because a lot of things that he said didn't come true. For example, he said there was going to be essentially a civil
Civil
war
War,
slash maybe even a hot war internally in the United States in 2004, I think,
something like I'm not
2004,
sure about the
2005,
dates, somewhere around
2007,
there.
something like that. And then there would be a world war in like 2013 or something like that. And that would be the World War III that we would
Decimated
experience. That
everything.
would be, yeah, it would be essentially a world ending war at that point. Catastrophic, you know.
I know he mentioned one about so 3 billion people would die in some war. I don't know
That
if it
World
was
War
that
Three.
one.
Yeah,
That's
World War
that
Three.
one. So the 2013 war, and since that stuff hasn't happened, they say, well, that's a lot of other things also that he said that it's not really
Yeah.
true.
Well, the thing is, it makes sense that it wouldn't necessarily happen, and some of the stuff, the writings on the wall of it not necessarily being out of the realm of possibility of still happening. Like we had some crazy unrest a little while back, right? When the you know what the when the pandemic hit and all that kind of stuff, like that could have very easily devolved into a civil war very quickly, where the world at large is super tense right now. Like China's getting super powerful, the Russians are, clawing back to trying to become USSR. Like, America's losing dominance little by little. Like, I could see where that might trickle into some kind of big conflict. Like, so it's like even those things that didn't come true, maybe the divergence was bigger than he thought, and maybe it's a little bit different or delayed. But he also said stuff that did come true, right? Like he kind of implied that there would be another Gulf War. That happened. He also kind of implied that there would be the Discovery would explode. That happened. So it's like, or caught on fire.
He
Some
said
stuff
something like,
happened.
"Tell me how you tell me how you
Handled
figured out
your
your space plane re-entry, overheating or something
yeah
like that." And then years later, then Columbia or whatever got blown up. And so yeah, was it
Yeah,
Columbia? I think it
but
was
to me,
Discovery.
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 To me, the predictions he made are kind of Nostradamus ish. I mean, kind of vague. Like, think about this. I can predict that a space shuttle is going to blow up eventually because it's a highly sophisticated piece of equipment built by the lowest bidder. Some shit's going to go wrong eventually. You could predict that commonsensically. You know what I mean? And things like that. You could. There's going to
Like
be a
who's going to be
World
the
War.
next
There's
big? Yeah,
there's
who's going
gonna
to be the
there's
big
gonna be a
one?
war in the Middle East. Well, no shit, because there's billions of dollars of oil in the Middle East, and all kinds of religious tension.
Right.
Of course, there's going to be a war in the Middle East. Just when, So
Yeah, but what about an American Civil War? No one was thinking that was going to happen, and
I
that
was
hasn't
thinking
happened.
I was thinking that
But
was
we
going to
got
happen back then.
dangerously.
I remember
I
specifically
don't know.
looking for a movie that came out in I want to say the late '90s. It was called The Second Civil War, and it was kind of a satire movie. It's goofy. I don't even know if I could find it. I had a hard time finding it before. But what it was about media getting so crazy, about ratings and just about the stupidity that they go through now. They were
So now,
unreliable.
yeah,
It's exactly. I mean, it fits perfectly with now. It's almost like idiocracy. Um, so they get to that point where they're starting to just disseminate information that's BS.
so now,
You've got these states that end up seceding, and then you have this fight between the federal. It's again, it's satire. It's kind of like a dark comedy type of thing, but it it brought a lot of that stuff to light that I think that we have an issue with today, and it fits perfectly with our timeline. Um, but I think it fits more with like 2008 ish rather than like back in 2004. But there was still people talking about Civil War type stuff even back then, especially like
yeah.
yeah.
seceding from the
But
nation. So
there again, that's something that's kind of predictable too, right?
yeah,
There may not ever be an actual civil war, but there's always going to be civil unrest.
yeah.
I mean, there's just going to be, you know.
Yeah. What about all the theoretical physics that he knew about before Stephen Hawking?
I don't know about all that.
Let's
Don't let's not
what
talk
about
about
him,
that part.
him figuring out, that many singularities are real and explaining a really logical way on how time machines would actually function, or how you could use many singularities, and the research that CERN was doing with the Hadron Collider to bring us to the point where we supposedly got in his world line. Like
Well,
that was
That's
kind of
some of that
nuts.
stuff sounds pretty reasonable to believe that like somebody if somebody was into physics at the time, they might have thought of those ideas, but just been laughed
it
at by.
just got lucky.
Well, I mean, no, I mean, like, there's people that think outside the box, and then they get criticized for it. I mean,
Sure.
and like, unless you have the consensus of all the other scientists in your field, you're not going to
Yeah.
make it anywhere with those ideas. So, I mean, he could have just been somebody that knew, or knew somebody that knew that stuff, or thought about that stuff, and just got laughed at by the rest of the community. Um,
Who's that? Who's the Unabomber? What's the name of the Unabomber again?
Ted
Ted.
Kaczynski.
Yeah, could have been one of those type of guys, like a hermit, crazy, super brilliant genius, like super smart guy that was just like everyone thought he was nuts, and he hated the world because of how things were kind of looking like they were going to turn into, and then just went off to live in the woods or something, or went off to be a little loner. There's also like there's another like story about where he came from, or who John Titor was, and it was, I can't remember the guy's name, but he's known for essentially doing like an art project online where he was trying to recreate like folk tales or fairy tales, like the Grimm's fairy tales online, and like kind of have them slowly become real, like a real story, a real part of human history. Because a lot of those tales were tales that we were, people actually told their kids back in the day, like verbally, like down. They'll tell, or generation to generation to try to help them learn, like parables and morals and blah blah blah, or like don't trust strangers, stay with your mom, and all that kind of nonsense. So like he was trying to essentially recreate that and have something that grew with humanity in the new age of the internet. And he did that successfully with some story that blew up, and I can't remember the details of it, but like that guy supposedly said that he was a consultant for a group of other people, that it's IT guys or engineers. They were like, like a few guys that were like friends or something, and they wanted it to essentially do the same thing. They wanted to do something similar to what he had already done, and they reached out to him on how to go about doing it. And one of the things that he says is that John Titor is actually that. John Titor is essentially a long form troll from these couple, this group of people. They wanted to do this art project, and it's a long-term troll art project where they're creating a myth and letting it evolve. So they put out the facts, and then the facts slowly turned into some pretender going on to the forums, and another pretender, and then over the course of 20, 30, 40 years, or in the or down the line, if they don't tell anybody that it's fake, it slowly turns into this, like an urban mystery or whatever, or a folk tale, and it takes on a life of itself. um, and he mentioned like trying to tell them to come clean and expose, and they don't want to. And the reason he's not going to expose them is because he respects that that's their art, and that they own the the creation of it, so he doesn't want to like expose them or something.
Well, I can tell you one thing: their art is definitely not in website construction, because JohnTitor.com is garbage.
Well, no, JohnTier.com's not them.
That's
Um,
JohnTier.com's
that's the
supposedly like
coast
some
to
super
coast, isn't
fan.
it?
maybe
Yeah,
maybe
yeah.
that's part of their troll.
That might be owned
Well,
by
I think
Coast
I
to
think
Coast AM. I'm not sure, but that so they still have that Coast to Coast AM with John Nuri, I believe is his name, and they still have some crazy stuff on there. Like some people will call in and say that they're time travelers or alien abductees and stuff like that. So those still
yeah,
exist. And,
it's more of like an Alex Jones, but it's more Inquirer like.
yeah,
The old
check
tabloids.
the hot sheets.
yeah.
Check the hot
Check the hot
sheets.
sheet for the truth.
So I don't know. I kind of like the idea of him being a scientist that wanted to get his ideas out, and by doing it this way, that might lead us to building this time machine that doesn't exist yet.
I mean,
It's fun.
could be.
So somebody actually patented the idea for this
Yeah.
space, this space. I'm sorry, time space device or whatever. They
Yeah,
I
it
can't
was
remember what
from
happened.
Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Yeah, the guy from
Yeah, yeah.
Tulsa, he patented it, put like 30 something pages or something of it on the patent site, got it all patented and stuff. Then he got arrested for assault and battery or something and got put in jail. So
Did he? Did
supposedly at
he?
least. So
Is he in jail now, or did he
I don't know.
mysteriously die?
I don't know. Did he get
Mm,
what's his name?
foul play, government.
I didn't say that.
Did he get Epstein?
I didn't. I didn't say that. I think we
Maybe he went
need.
into the future.
I think we need to do research on this right now. Let's find out if this guy is still alive.
It's probably still in jail.
Who's on this? I'm on it, I guess.
My keyboard's too clickety.
Mine's pretty clickety too. I'm sure everybody just heard that. Sorry about that. I saw this on this website the other day. Lord knows if I'm going to be able to find it again about the dude in Tulsa. Um, go ahead and talk amongst yourselves while I look for this.
Well, my whole thing is whether or not the guy's real, and realistically, the odds are that it's not. A lot of the concepts that he brings up with regards to just how time functions and how time works and the physics and stuff like it's super interesting. You know what I mean? Like it's actually very thought provoking, and it makes you like at the very least, the guy wasn't a total, like idiot, right? Like he definitely seemed to have a cohesive grasp on the story that he was telling, right? It seemed like at the very least he was a very good storyteller, and he world builded very well and thought out his responses so that everything kind of melded with each other, all kind of made sense. Um, and he seemed like he was relatively knowledgeable about certain topics. So, I mean, it's pretty interesting. There's a whole slew of questions and a whole slew of posts on johntitor.com where you can go and you can essentially go to all the original posts and questions that he had, and it's like there was a YouTube video that essentially read it all, and it was like 5.5 hours or something, and it's just question after question of people asking him things and him answering them. And if you go to johnteeter.com, they have that stuff there. They have the original story, original info. So like johnteeter.com is a pretty useful place for people to search if they're interested in just learning about it and getting lost in the weeds of it all. So it's relatively cool, at least. It's a cool little topic.
There's other time travelers that
Okay,
you've heard about
his
too.
name.
So it's kind of interesting how he compares and contrasts with some of those other guys. Um, but go ahead, Aaron.
His name is Marlon B. Pohlman, Pohlman, and I don't know if there's a wiki on him or
What's
anything.
when they asked him, where he goes most frequently, he kind of constantly mentions going back to like the 60s and 70s and 80s, and it's like makes you like wonder like, what the heck. Yeah, it's like hypothetically you were. What specifically about that time frame would you be going back to get?
Is it this same guy? Computer executive raped 4 women he met at parties after drugging them with LSD, ecstasy, and laughing gas.
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, that's the same guy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Must have had access to those chemicals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Might have been why he was losing his mind or something.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Maybe he had that third eye opened and had all these great ideas from, black holes. I don't know. But anyway, I'm not going to do any more research on that guy. He might be alive. He might not be. But
yeah, I don't want to give him any. Don't
he
give
looks
him any glory.
He looks like a freak. So, yep, I'm being Judgy Judgerson. He does look like a freak, and I believe he probably did what he is accused of.
When he gets out of jail, he's coming after you.
He also Cheater mentioned that like AIDS in the like someone asked him like is AIDS or cancer like figured out, and he's like AIDS isn't cured yet, but there's like there's decent medicines for it, and that cancer there's been a lot of traction on. That's something that's actually legit going on right now, where like there's medicines you can take for AIDS to kind of keep it under control and live with it, and then there's very little that can be done about uh, curing it so far as we're aware, right?
Of course.
But then cancer, because it's not everyone refers to cancer as one thing, but cancer is a bunch of different
Sure.
things. We figured out how to stop a bunch of those things, or a bunch of them, right? Like, so it's like that's kind of interesting that he would know that stuff, right? And there's a lot of other random little things here and there that are kind of interesting.
So one of the big questions is why didn't he why didn't he say anything about like the iPhone, which is one of the most revolutionary enhancements in in modern history, right? Like, I mean, that pretty
Well,
much changed everything in technology
in his
from that
in
point.
his world line, there was a huge civil war before the iPhone when it came out. The iPhone came out in 2007. The Civil War was around 2004, 2005. So in his world line, that maybe never happened. In his world line, Apple maybe went bankrupt. Like at one point, Apple was a penny stock, right? Like so, and he
Steve Jobs might have
explicitly
overdosed in his college dorm room before he ever came up with the idea in his timeline.
Right.
I mean,
so
you just never know. That's what I find real hard or easy and convenient. I could say I'm a time traveler. Well, in
yeah.
in my in my timeline, this happened, and I'm
That's
president.
why that's why it's the best like
Cover,
thing to yeah, it's the best thing to use.
sure.
But it's also why even if there ever was a real legit time traveler, how would you ever know? Like how would you ever like besides you getting in the machine and literally traveling to a different time, how would you ever know? You would never believe them.
Well, I mean, the way to believe him would be like the whole Back to the Future 2. I mean, it'd be, or if maybe it was one, I can't remember. The whole sports almanac, right? Bring me a
But the thing
sports
is,
almanac, and
but
let me.
you can make a sports almanac
Well,
and then
it
bring it.
needs to be right.
But if time really works the way he says,
Oh,
where
they may
divergence is a
not.
real
They may
thing,
not
the
win. And
winner's not.
I
He actually
I
explicitly
think he
says that. He's
mentions
like,
that at
oh,
some point. He's like,
yeah,
okay,
yeah,
well,
it's
hold on. If the divergence grows over time, okay, I want to
well,
know about a
it's
game.
not.
I want to know about a game tomorrow. Tell me the
It's
winner of the game tomorrow. The divergence should not be that much.
no. It's not only over time. So the divergence is different regardless of where. Like, there's different. There's some world lines that are closer to the one you're currently in, and there's some that are very, very, very different. And it's all about essentially like trying to use the precision of the machine to get to the world line that you or with the divergence that you want. It's like they're essentially going back in time when it comes relatively blind, right? When it comes to the world line divergence, they're trying to stick to as close as possible to his world line because then it makes it that
Well,
much more difficult
that's
to get back.
sketchy as shit.
How?
I mean, if
Because
you
he's
go
saying
back in
one to
here
two
and
percent, 1 to 2% divergence is what he was saying was the difference between his world line and ours, and that's an estimate. But even if you think about it on a macro scale, like 1 to 2% of every world event being different, that's huge.
yeah.
Everything in history, 1 to 2% difference. Like every yes or no decision.
I mean, he
Like
did mention that like he would numerous times he would go back in time and or back and forth, and the game results would be different. Like a football game would be different, or
mhm,
there'd be different people playing that game or whatever. But that there was
different
originally.
teams,
So
different players on the
right,
team.
different teams, different so different Super Bowl winners. Two.
So yet again, another the perfect cover.
I know
It's
it's
different.
it's
Well, the
it's an
thing
easy
is,
cop out, honestly, but
it is, but it makes sense.
I say it's
On
logical,
it's logical.
but
the cool thing
it's
that
an
I
easy
liked
cop
about
out.
it was that it wasn't like he came and was like, "Hey, this is all this stuff." It was like people would ask him these things, and then he would reply back with a very succinct, like logical explanation that ties in to how he says physics works. So like, or how timelines work. So like stuff like that, he didn't just come up and say like, "Oh yeah, this is why I can't give you game results and stuff to prove myself." It was like people would ask him to do that, and he's like, "Oh, this is why. This is why even if I were to do that, it wouldn't work, and that's not why I'm here, and blah blah blah. But that's not why I'm doing this."
Have you guys? Did I show you guys the that TikTok account, the Last Survivor?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That to me kind of is in line with this, because that's pretty trippy. Anybody that's listening, there's a TikTok account. I can't remember the exact guy's real name. It's a Mexican name. But if you just look up the Last Survivor on Google,
I think
TikTok.
I believe he's from Spain.
Okay, it's a Spanish name. Whatever, it's Spanish. I mean, whatever.
Same difference, different continent.
It's not an English name. Let's put it that way. And I know it's not Russian or German. So anyway, this guy posts videos, and it's videos of him walking around, and there's literally no people. And I mean, he goes to places
in, like, hot spots of the
During-
cities.
Yeah, like he goes to
during the pandemic.
Yeah, well, but he's doing it in the daytime, in the airport, in the police station. I mean, these are hot spots where there's going to be some kind of people, and it's pretty freaky. So
yeah, and
Yeah,
to think,
and-
even if it was during the pandemic, there'd be somebody like policing the place.
I think it was like the police station too. It was like in like
right.
back of restaurants and stuff like that. It was
Oh,
kind of.
but there was food on the table still in some of those places.
yeah, and he
And like
claimed
his whole thing is he like woke up or
yeah,
something like that.
2020. He
or
woke up
something,
in the hospital in 2027,
and
and
everyone's gone.
he goes to back to the same hospital, empty, nothing, no people. Everything's there, beds and all this stuff.
And a lot of people are like, "Oh, it's like he got permission from X people to film there, and it's like he almost like he's using it as a set, or maybe he has friends there, or maybe it's like they removed it in post and edit." I'm like, okay, let's humor you. You know how difficult that would be? Like how time consuming it would be to edit out every single
No,
instance of anybody in
there's
every
no
frame?
animals. No animals. There's
Yeah,
no
nothing.
birds. No birds in the
Yeah.
sky. You never see any birds. He goes to the zoo. No animals. No bears. No lions. No nothing. Anyway, all I'm saying is if that is edited, that dude, when he comes and admits it, he has a job with Sony or Disney or whoever he wants, because I've never seen nothing like it. There's no shadows. There's no blurs. There's nothing. I mean, there's no people. So anyway, y'all check that out. Shout out to him. He's not paying me or nothing, but that I thought it was pretty cool.
It's neat. It's something everybody should look at least.
All right, so back to John Titor. Let's wrap this up. Let's land the plane. Alan, John Titor, a time traveler?
He says he's a time traveler.
What do you think, though?
I think that I put a lot of stake in the whole like living art scenario
Okay.
and I think it might have been like legit like a bunch of super intelligent, like nerd guys, like Big Bang Theory, right? There's a bunch of like super geniuses, they're roommates or something, and they like are back in the 90s or 2000s that were in school, right? 98 to 2002, which is when he was active, right? They're like in school or in grad school or something, and they're sitting in the dorm room. They're like, let's do some funny shit. Let's make this thing. And they're like super intelligent, super, smart, and they have ideas on physics and how physics might work, and maybe it's out there, but it's possible, or maybe it's something that as far as we're concerned, is really crazy and out there. But it was something that was already being debated because Stephen Hawking had already talked about it and denied it. So if he had denied it and said it wasn't true, it's something that was clearly in the ethos, right, of humanity. Like people had already discussed the possibilities of it. So like that, or maybe one of the guys was a super techie engineer guy, and he actually knew about the 5100 crap. Like
Right.
there's a lot of these little like nuggets where it's like, and like you said, even some of the predictions are things that if you think about it, and you maybe you're hanging out with your friends in college and you're smoking a couple J's and you're sitting there, thinking about what could happen in the future, right? Like you can see where you might come up with some of this stuff. So maybe that's where I kind of put my stake in it. All that being said, I do think that that's how time works in the sense of like the multiple constant molding and melding, parallel universes and whatnot. And I do think that um like the concepts that he had on like just physics in general were very, very accurate and logical and
Okay, so
made
not
sense.
a time traveler. Big Bang Theory, group of guys living in the dorm making
Art project, yeah.
art project trolling. Isaac, John Titor, is he a time traveler?
This is one of those stories that I definitely want to believe is true. It's there was a time where I just sat around watching YouTube videos about different time travelers and such, and this is one of the stories that I remember. Um, but I think there's a little bit too too much convenience in the story and such that make it unbelievable. But it's one of those things that I just want to believe, but I can't believe it. It's not believable at this point, at least. If he comes back and says something else, maybe we'll see. But
All right.
uh,
My thought is it's horse shit. Because if he was so nonchalantly flying around the universe in time, why hadn't I come back to visit myself? Why haven't any of y'all come back to visit y'all selves? I
Maybe we're
mean,
one of the 3 billion that died in the World War.
if it's not a big deal, why? Okay, well, what about the other 7 billion on the planet? No one else is reporting
Maybe
this.
not every world. Maybe not. Well, maybe not every world line.
Hey, this is my opinion.
All right, fair enough.
It's horse shit. Future self, come back, hit me up. And if you want to prove to me that time travel is real, I agree with you. I do think time travel would work that way, with my little pea brain, trying to wrap around physics. But right now, I think trash wrapped in garbage. So, anyway.
It's a neat story. I think everybody should go out there and look at that information.
It's very interesting.
It's definitely interesting and a good time sink. I mean, and that's really why we do this in the first place. It's because it's a good time sink and it's fun to discuss these things. So that being said, we're gonna end it. And until the next one, guys, check us out on the social media that I mentioned before. Hit us up on partiallycultured.com. Hit all the comments and likes and bells and all that crap if you enjoy any of the stuff we're talking about and want us to keep doing this. So anyway, until the next one, we'll see you guys.
Stay cultured.
See you guys. Stay cultured.